So we've seen in verse 25 that Cyrus came 49 years after the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem, and wrote a decree allowing the people to go back. And we can read further in Ezra about how the people faced opposition while they were trying to construct or reconstruct Jerusalem and the temple, and how the surrounding people hindered them constantly and forced the work to stop. And then there was another decree, as we mentioned in earlier videos, by Darius the Persian, now a different Darius, who allows the construction to start again. And finally, they're allowed to get their priesthood back. We read about in Ezra chapter 7. And finally, the last decree by Artaxerxes in 444 that allowed Nehemiah to rebuild the wall again. All this time, they're trying to get the kings, the people in power, to put a stop to this, because they kept pointing out how dangerous these Jews were going to be once they had this defensive wall around their city again, because these people did not want to pay tribute to these foreign kings. And this continued on, as we see even in the first century of the current era, how there was constant rebellion against the Romans over taxes. And this finally ended in 70 AD with Titus destroying the temple. And this is what is being talked about. Plus there's also earlier fulfillment of this, so it kind of has different phases to it. But that was the final end to it, was after the Bar Kokhba revolt in the early part of the 2nd century of the current era. But we see in the last half of verse 25 that simply that in the additional 62 weeks that are left after Cyrus, that the temple is going to be rebuilt, the street, the moat. And now to verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall an anointed one be cut off, but not for himself. An anointed one will be cut off, but not for himself, can also mean that he will make a covenant. This word cut off can also mean to make a covenant. It is typically used in the Old Testament, illustrating either someone that is being removed from the covenant people, being cast out because he was refusing to keep a law, a man that was unrighteous, a man that would not follow the law and have himself circumcised, was cut off from his people, cut off from his rights under the laws, and wasn't allowed to worship with the people. And the phrase for not himself means exactly to non-exist. You might recall that when Moses was talking to the burning bush and he asked God, what God should I say is going to send me into Egypt here? What God should I say? And God says, I am that I am, or I am that what I am becoming. He says, Heya, Asher, Heya. And I plan on looking at that more closely sometime in the future with you. But Heya, I am, or I exist, or I am that which is, I am what I am going to be. This word here for not is ayin. It means to not exist, the complete opposite, to become a non-entity. And this is a good proof for the Christians that this Messiah mentioned in this verse is not Jesus. They believe that Jesus died in 3 days, he was resurrected and came back to life. This anointed one is cut off and cease totally to exist. He doesn't come back after 3 days. He becomes a non-entity. But I believe that what this verse is telling us is that he is going to make a covenant. This anointed one is going to make a covenant which comes to nothing. It's worthless. And how we can see that is because the following verse, 27, is just a further explanation, a rewording of verse 26. 26, after 62 weeks, or in other words, after 434 years, and in the text it's actually after the 62 weeks, shall a Messiah or an anointed one be cut off, and not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come, a different prince, not an anointed one, not the one whose actions are sanctioned by the God of Israel, shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be a flood, or an outpouring, and unto the end of the war, or the rebellion, desolations are determined. Verse 27, he shall confirm the covenant, the cutting off, or the covenant, a berith, means to cut, with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation, in other words, the blood offerings and the meal offerings, to cease. For the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, until the end of the prophecy and the total fulfillment of this. And that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate, or upon the ruined. So this is talking about someone anointed, either a king, a priest, or a prophet, that is going to make a covenant, and he is going to come to naught. And after this, the temple is going to be destroyed, and the city, by the people of a coming prince. And then outpouring of desolations, outpouring of an abomination. Abomination can be an idol. It can mean just filth. Something that shocks, totally shocks these people. And that's what's being talked about in these verses. Let me pick this up in one more video.